A very good afternoon or morning, depending on what time you're watching this. Thanks for clicking on to the Wednesday, the 3rd of July Tropical Outlook. We're going to be looking at the latest with regards to still Category 4 Hurricane Beryl that is making an approach at the time of recording close to Jamaica. It is expected to make some very significant impacts here over the next several hours. This is the latest satellite imagery as the sun comes up this afternoon or this morning, and the time is currently just before 3 p.m. here in the UK, just before 10 a.m. New York. And you can see here that we do have a slightly different look to Beryl compared to what we had as it moved through the Lesser Antilles, making a direct impact on the southern portion of the islands, the Grenadines, St. Vincent, and Carriacou Island in particular was seen a very, very significant and rather devastating impact from a 150 mile per hour upper end Category 4 hurricane. We know that it intensified to 165 miles per hour. The conditions both within the atmosphere and the ocean below was optimum, reflective more of mid-August as opposed to early July in terms of sea surface temperature. The content, ocean content, and the depth of warmth down below the surface was also extremely conducive for the rapid intensification of Beryl as well. And now it is passing south of Hispaniola. It is encountering some dry air and also increased shear out of both the northwest and even to an extent the southwest. So you can see here, like I say, the imagery showing a more cloud-filled eye. We're seeing some heavy convection now well away from the center of the core, and therefore that is representative of increased shear present within the atmosphere surrounding it. We do have a trough digging to the north of the system. That is one of the reasons behind the increase in shear. And also we are seeing some dry air getting pulled off Cuba, off Hispaniola, and it is kind of managing to fight this dry air off, I must admit. If you look at this imagery here, this is the system that is also being monitored now, moving into the Lesser Antilles here. This is Hurricane Beryl. You can see here some dry air present both to the west of the system ahead of it, and also we've got some dry air getting wrapped in ahead of the other invest area as well. We're seeing larger concentrations of Saharan dust now coming off Africa, crossing over the Atlantic as well. And my hunch would be that we are going to gradually start to see the Atlantic quietening down. The initial MJO pulse that moved through the Central America region kind of kicked everything off, so to speak. And I think what we are going to start to see is with the MJO being more present over the Indian Ocean, the Indian subcontinent. We've already discussed that the Indian monsoon has now swept the length of India now. It's ahead of schedule, and the atmosphere just on a global scale looks to be becoming a little bit less favourable in the Atlantic basin as we go through towards the middle portions of July here. So I want to look at this several aspects, but first and foremost, we're going to look at the latest from the National Hurricane Center at the time of recording. So this is the 8 a.m. advisory for Wednesday, the 3rd of July, advisory number 19A. Current conditions within Beryl, maximum sustained winds still at 125 knots or 145 miles per hour. So despite a little bit of dry air, some wind shear, it's still maintaining very powerful strength. Remember, the models did not see a major Category 5 hurricane, within a couple of days before it became that peak intensity. The models did not reflect that level of intensity, and therefore the models have been struggling now, coming to terms with the fact that this system developed into a much stronger and more powerful system than what was initially forecasted. The stronger the system, the more it interacts with the upper levels of the atmosphere. So therefore, that that means that it interrupts the projected track seen by the models. The stronger the system, the more it's stacked vertically up through the atmosphere and to greater levels, to greater altitudes above sea level, and therefore it interacts more with steer and flow in the very upper levels of the atmosphere. So therefore, we did see a further north turn on the track compared to what the models suggested. The weaker the system, the lower it is through the atmosphere, the more chance it's likely to continue westwards. But there is wobbles back and forward, and also what the models are struggling to understand is with such a strong system, it tends to fight off drier and increased wind shear as well. So therefore, it's having a hard time. The global models are having a hard time um, predicting the anticipated weakening as it continues to progress west northwest over the Caribbean Sea. But you can see here 145 mph winds, central pressure still low at 952 millibars, and it's moving west northwest. Continues that track, has been for several days at 17 knots or 20 miles per hour. So you can see here that this is the key message from the latest from the National Hurricane Center. Devastating hurricane force winds, life-threatening storm surge, and damaging waves are expected in portions of Jamaica beginning this afternoon, obviously local time, and in the Cayman Islands early Thursday. Residents in these areas should listen to local government and emergency management officials for preparedness and or evacuation orders. Life-threatening flash flooding and mudslides from heavy rain are expected over much of Jamaica and southern Haiti through today. Beryl is forecast to remain a hurricane when it approaches the Yucatan Peninsula and Belize late Thursday, where hurricane or tropical storm watches have been issued. There remains uncertainty in the track and intensity forecast of Beryl over the western Gulf of Mexico this weekend. Interests in the western Gulf of Mexico should monitor the progress of Beryl. So that is the latest from the NHC. And if we have a look at the latest track, you can see the general continuation of that west to northwesterly track. Now you notice here that it is expected to be a major hurricane as it passes the south coast of Jamaica. Really over the next couple of hours, we're going to see that the closest approach, the eye wall, like I say, the inner core remains largely intact, but we do have shear both northwesterly and southwesterly. That is allowing a little bit of a lopsided aspect to the structure, the vertical structure of Beryl. So therefore, we're seeing some of the convection getting displaced away from the inner core, a little bit less organization, a little bit more ragged looking. But what we are still seeing is the key aspects is within that core itself, we're still generating 145 mile per hour wind sustained, higher gusts also. Then it'll make us an approach to the south of the Cayman Islands during the early hours of Thursday morning before it moves out into the wider open western Caribbean Sea, making an approach somewhere between Cozumel and the north and the border with Belize. Now, depending on whereabouts that crosses over the Yucatan, could determine levels of ingestion of dry air, but more importantly, land interaction as well. The greater the time spent over land, the more likelihood that the inner core is disrupted and we see a much weaker system then move out into the Bay of Campeche. If it stays a little bit further north, say up closer to Cancun, for example, it'll spend less time over land and therefore it will enter the warm waters of the Western Gulf earlier. Therefore, there's less disruption within the inner core and the structure of the circulation itself, and we may see a stronger system reform over the Western Gulf before it makes an approach on the upper Mexico coast or close to the Texas-Mexico border, and that will likely be late weekend into the early portions of next week. So we'll need to monitor this situation very, very carefully. Looking at this is the 850 to 200 HPA bulk shear over the next 5 days, and you notice here we do have quite hostile conditions here over Cuba northwards. We have got strong easterly trade winds here. That has generally been the flow that Hurricane Beryl has been embedded within for the last several days now here, anywhere generally from the Leewards and to the east of that. That's obviously when it became a hurricane, the most easterly hurricane to form in the month of June on record. It has been generally riding. We've got a strong ridge of high pressure to the north, and we've got some fairly brisk easterly trade winds. Now, even these trade winds have been creating a little bit of a shear, because what we've had in recent days is a lack of wind in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere and fairly strong trade winds blowing out of the east at the surface. That actually creates a little bit of shear within the vertical column of the atmosphere, but that has not been having any detrimental or degrading effects on Hurricane Beryl. But it is becoming it is entering a more hostile environment within the Caribbean itself. There is more increased shear, there is more dry air present as well, but it's still, because of the strength of the system and because it's becoming larger, it is managing to fight off some of the shear. And the question mark will become, as it moves to the south of Jamaica, the interaction between Hispaniola and Jamaica, lesser to an extent the Cayman Islands because they're such a small island, but you've got the mountains here of both Hispaniola, Jamaica, and even further north up over Cuba. The problem is how much how much de- decor, how much negative influence will land interaction have with the structure of the system. So you've got three aspects: dry air, wind shear, land interaction, that is going to have a negative influence on Hurricane Beryl. Looking at another aspect, this is the ECMWF, again 200 to 850 millibar wind shear. You can see here, this is the system as it approaches the south shore of Jamaica here. We've got some very stiff winds out to the west of the system, but it's as we play through the next several frames here, you notice that it's starting to interact more with these southwesterly winds, and therefore that is likely to continue forcing the weakening of the system. But you notice here that the model is suggesting a 990 millibar center. That to me is too low, and therefore it's seeing too quick of a weakening. The model's already had the system weakening far more than what it actually still is. We're still talking about a Category 4, 145 mile per hour hurricane. The models did not see that being the case on approach to Jamaica. So we have to take this with a pinch of salt in terms of the central pressure. I would not take that as gospel given what we've seen so far. But you notice here that it is definitely embedded within a southwesterly sheared environment, and therefore we are likely to continue seeing the degradation of the system as it continues to track towards the Yucatan Peninsula. You can see here it's embedded within a fairly sheared environment overall. Looking at the humidity levels here, so this is the, let me just see here, just bear with me a second here, folks, to see if I can find the right chart, and probably I won't, because I always manage to do in these videos something where I lose something and can't find it, and then I have to stall. So we're going to look at the GFS here. Do I have the appropriate chart? So this is going to be the big test. Can I manage to recover myself for the first time in a while, because I didn't before? Oh, here we go. Let me see. So this is the 700 to 300 HPA moisture content within the atmosphere. You can see here that it's still embedded within plenty of moist air, moist environment here. It's managing to fight off the dry air that's ahead of it. So there's the tongue of dry air between Beryl and the other invest area, moving, approaching towards the Leeward Islands here. We've got two tongues of dry in between these two systems and now ahead of the system itself. And as we play through the loop of the GFS, you can see here that it's managing to do a pretty good job at fighting off this dry air. Notice here the pressure all the way up to 992 millibars. This is by the time we reach 6Z Friday this week. it makes an approach very, very close to Cancun. If you notice here, it's a 992, probably hurricane, I would imagine. Then the pressure rises to 1,000 millibars, then it drops back to 999 millibars, 994, 991. So it is actually becoming quite a bit stronger, seen by the GFS, as we approach the late Sunday into Monday time frame. Look at this here, the pressure's down to 977 millibars, and it's pretty much the latest run of the GFS indicates that this system is moving right onto the border between Texas and Mexico, and it actually takes a little bit of a turn up the coast of Texas here as a 971 millibar hurricane, 969 millibars here. So that is quite an interesting solution by the model here as we go into the early portions of next week here. So we'll need to keep an eye quite closely monitoring this situation. So I want to look at a couple of other aspects here. Let's have a look and see what the latest on Beryl looks like up close, and it'll kind of explain to you a little bit about how the system itself is looking a lot more ragged compared to what it did some time ago. So this is the latest IR imagery here showing that we do have a cloud-filled eye. We still do have an intact inner core, if you notice here, with a belt of high cloud tops, cooling cloud tops, lots of deep convection, hot towers surrounding the center of the system. But this is the evidence to support the wind sheared environment. We've got a blow up of strong thunderstorms here, if you notice, on the western side of Hispaniola here. That is indicating that we have got a little bit of shear coming in from the southwesterly direction, and it's pushing a lot of these high cloud tops to the northeast, and that is essentially showing the kind of elongated, stretched out structure, but the core is intact, and that is the important aspect when it comes to the strength of the system as it makes an approach on Jamaica here. So we are going to have to expect, unfortunately, a very, very serious situation ongoing over the next several hours in Jamaica as Beryl crosses over the island. But I want to talk a little bit about the reason behind why Beryl became such a mighty storm so early in the season. And I think one of the biggest aspects is the 12-month stretch of record-breaking warm temperatures within the tropical Atlantic. I think that has a lot to do with it. The build-up of heat. We're about a month and a half ahead of schedule in terms of seeing these incredible water temperatures. This is the latest sea surface temperatures within the western portion of the Atlantic basin. So essentially, at the surface, Beryl has been crossing over 29 Celsius waters, but the 20 Celsius isotherm extends within this region where Beryl has crossed over. It extends down to 250 meters below the surface, that 20 Celsius isotherm, and you're probably talking 150 meters of 27 to 29 Celsius waters, which means that as these systems cross over these waters, typically when you've got a kind of thin layer of optimum water temperatures, say 27, 28, 29 Celsius waters, if you've got a depth only down to about, say, 50 meters or so, as these systems cross over, they tend to upwell colder waters from deep below the surface. They rise to the surface, and then it cuts off this fuel supply. It's like a car struggling for fuel, and it then cuts out. And it's the same idea with a tropical system. When you've got optimum water temperatures down to levels where it cannot upwell these deeper, colder waters, therefore you've got that optimum fuel supply, and that is exactly what has happened with Beryl. These water temperatures have been building a month, 2 months ahead of schedule, and you've got essentially mid to late August conditions within the main development region of the Atlantic Basin. That is one aspect. Another aspect, June normally quite a dusty, dry environment, especially within the Atlantic, edging into the Eastern Caribbean Sea. You tend to have a lot of waves of African dust large concentrations of African dust moving off the continent across the Atlantic towards the United States. We've not seen as much of that because the system itself is further south due to the early time of the year. Remember, the intertropical convergence zone is further south at this time of the year. It's still migrating northwards, and therefore it's managed to avoid a lot of that dusty air that's been present to the north of the circulation itself. And wind shear has also been further north, so it's managed to avoid both sheer dry air and it's over water temperatures that you would expect to see during the mid to late portions of August. So therefore, it's beaten Emily's record of 2005 by about 2 weeks, and it's a lot of the reason for that is down to the environment, both within the ocean and within the environment, and that has presented this record-breaking storm, and it really is quite remarkable stuff. This is an amazing, basically the story behind the incredible blow-up of Hurricane Beryl. This is a tweet here that shows it from tropical depression to Category 3 hurricane within 42 hours, and you see this very, very rapid organization within the inner core itself, the massive symmetry within the system, the central dense overcast, incredible inflow at the surface, incredible outflow at the upper levels of the atmosphere, and this system became, within the optimum environment, a near perfect development of a tropical cyclone that you'll ever see. So it really has been an amazing story so far. Unfortunately, it has come at a great cost, and that great cost has been the devastation seen in the lower Leeward Islands here. So let's have a very quick look. We'll end this video on a somewhat somber note as we see the devastation that was caused in the lower portion of the Leeward Islands here. This is a video here from YouTube showing.
And if you could just let us know your name, would be great.
Robert Brown. Well,
so this is Carriacou, part of the Grenada. This was obviously the landfall point when at the time, Category 4 Hurricane Beryl moved ashore, generating 150 mile per hour sustained winds, likely higher gusts, maybe in the 160, 170, even higher range. You can see here very, very little in the way of intact structures, trees wiped out off hillsides, and total devastation has been caused here in Carriacou Island in the lower Grenadines. So a very, very sad sight indeed. And hopefully our thoughts and prayers are with the folks of Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and eventually the Yucatan Peninsula and beyond over the next several days. We will continue to do these tropical outlooks. I'm going to be following this hurricane season right the way throughout, and we will monitor each development and each impact as they come about. So I'm going to round up there. I think this has been well long-winded, so I'm going to cut there. Hope you have a good day wherever you are, a safe one at that, if you're especially in the central and western portion of the Caribbean. Are you in harm's way? Are you watching this from any regions that have been hit either by Beryl or Alberto back a couple of weeks ago? I would be very, very curious to know that in the comments section below. But we will continue to monitor this situation. I will hopefully have another tropical outlook tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. And I'll see you next time with more. The European outlook will be released in the next couple of hours as well, so stay tuned for that as well. Have a good rest of your Wednesday. Bye for now.